The U.S. Armed Forces are widely regarded as the pinnacle of modern military power, boasting cutting-edge technology, advanced strategies, and nearly limitless funding. But while the U.S. may be the most powerful, it is not the largest. That title belongs to China's People's Liberation Army, or PLA, the biggest military force in the world, far outpacing any other national army in sheer numbers. However, in one key area the U.S. and China started evenly matched: naval power. Both nations currently operate over 350 combat-ready warships, making them global maritime giants. But fleet size alone doesn't tell the full story. So is the U.S. military really superior to China's? Or is Beijing on track to outpace Washington in both military dominance and geopolitical influence? Keep watching to find out what truly sets these two superpowers apart in today's episode of The Infographic Show, USA vs. China Military Power 2025 edition. The People's Liberation Army is undisputedly the world's largest military force in terms of active personnel. According to latest reports, the Chinese military boasts just over 2 million active troops, while the U.S. military has around 1.3 million. The massive gap in manpower is largely due to population size. China's total population stands at over 1.4 billion, whereas the U.S. has approximately 340 million residents based on the latest census data and government estimates. If we compare active troop number to total population size, the U.S. appears more militarized overall. Despite having fewer total soldiers, the U.S. maintains a global military presence capable of launching operations halfway across the world within days. This was most recently demonstrated by U.S. military actions against Iran-backed militias near Israel. In multiple operations, the U.S. utilized long-range aircraft, precision strikes, and its vast network of overseas bases to deliver devastating blows to insurgent forces. Because of its commitment to maintaining global influence, the U.S. is often referred to as the world police. Unlike other nations that rapidly expand or shrink their forces, the U.S. military's overall manpower has remained relatively stable for the past 2 decades, reflecting its long-term strategy of power projection rather than raw numbers. Any fluctuations in troop levels have been largely dictated by military engagements, with peaks occurring during the height of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. In recent years, as the focus has shifted toward great power competition, the emphasis has been on modernization, force readiness, and the integration of emerging technologies, rather than sheer manpower expansion. This is helped by the various advancements in military equipment, some of which we'll broach later, which allow the military to operate with fewer people overall. As such, the U.S. focuses not on quantity but on quality, with unparalleled access to state-of-the-art training, equipment, and strategies that the military uses to ensure that soldiers are at the top of their game. By contrast, China follows a quantity-first approach, relying on its larger active force and vast population pool to sustain its military. With over 2 million active troops, the PLA prioritizes sheer numbers as a key element of its defense strategy. However, if we examine the demographics of China's military, we see significant changes over the past 20 years. At the turn of the century, the PLA was estimated to have around 4 million active personnel. This implies that China has gradually reduced its reliance on sheer manpower. Typically, this was done by investing heavily in more modern equipment, cyber warfare, artificial intelligence, and precision strike capabilities. This restructuring aligns with Beijing's broader military reforms, which are aimed at transitioning from a traditionally land-based force to one capable of also operating at sea or in the air. While China's troop numbers have slightly decreased, the overall combat readiness and effectiveness of the PLA have significantly improved. The focus has shifted towards special operations, joint warfare, and mechanized forces, bringing China's military capabilities closer to modern Western standards. These advancements are further reinforced by increased military cooperation with Russia, one of China's closest strategic allies. Through joint exercises, the PLA has gained experience working alongside one of the world's most battle-hardened and technologically advanced armies, sharpening its combat readiness for future conflicts. What does this mean for our power rankings? Well, the U.S. holds a qualitative edge, but China could eke out a prolonged conflict through sheer numbers. Economically, though, China is nowhere near being able to match the sheer output and investments the U.S. has made over the past decade. Or at least not yet. This is reflected in the country's respective military budgets. For 2025, the military budget for the U.S. Army is estimated to be around $849 billion. This is a slight increase from the previous years, where the budget was hovering in the low $800 billion. However, the U.S. is actually spending less of its total GDP on military than in the previous few years. This showcases that the economic growth of the country doesn't completely correlate to an increase in the military budget. Nevertheless, the fact remains that the US is by far the biggest spender on its military and national defense programs, outspending the next few countries combined. Meanwhile, China's official military budget for 2025 stands at $266 billion, though some analysts argue the real figure could be closer to $700 billion. Despite its growing military power, China spends a smaller percentage of its GDP on defense, only 1.7% compared to the 3.4% that the US has consistently allocated over the past few years. However, China's military budget has been steadily rising, reflecting both economic growth and a commitment to modernization. In just 12 years, the budget has practically doubled, and since 2000 it has grown more than tenfold. This rapid expansion highlights two key trends: China's explosive economic development and the PLA's strategic shift toward modernization. Instead of relying solely on sheer numbers, the military is focusing on streamlining operations, enhancing technology, and deploying more advanced weaponry. Additionally, China stands alone as perhaps the only nation capable of mass-producing weapons at an unprecedented scale, thanks to its enormous industrial and manufacturing capacity. By contrast, the US weapons industry is more advanced, built on decades-old contracts with trusted manufacturers that provide state-of-the-art weaponry. However, this cutting-edge technology comes at a price: limited production capacity and skyrocketing costs for high-end military equipment. China, on the other hand, leverages its vast industrial base and a long history of reverse engineering Western military technology. While its weapons may not always match the originals in sophistication, they are often close enough, with the added advantage of being produced in a far greater quantity than the West could ever achieve. This results in a tie in terms of economic power. While the US is a superpower, China is aiming to become its main competitor or even outpace it in terms of gross economic product. But let's circle back to the start of the episode, where we mentioned comparable numbers of warships and discussed naval power. The US Navy and the People's Liberation Army Navy, or PLAN, are two of the most formidable maritime forces in the world. Yet, they have vastly different structures. Chief amongst the differences is the size and scale of their fleets. Both countries are estimated to possess around 350 warships, but the roles of those ships are vastly different. One major example of how raw numbers can be misleading is in aircraft carriers. While China's total naval fleet size may rival that of the US, the type and quality of those ships tell a different story. The US operates 11 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, the backbone of its global power projection. In contrast, China only has 2 active carriers, with a third currently undergoing sea trials. Furthermore, Chinese aircraft carriers are widely considered inferior to their American counterparts. By all accounts, even the newest design of the Chinese aircraft carrier, the Fujian, or the Type 003, still relies on mainly fossil fuels for traditional operation. That makes the carrier unsuitable for long-term patrols and extended times away from port, as it needs to refuel and restock much more frequently. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the US Navy's most advanced aircraft carrier, is a prime example of why American carriers remain unmatched. It can deploy a far superior air fleet, including the F-35C stealth fighter, the EA-18G Growler for electronic warfare, and the E-2D Hawkeye for airborne early warning, giving it a significant advantage in detection, coordination, and strike capabilities. The US carriers also possess more robust launching systems, automation, and even more potent self-defense weapons. So what does China actually have going for it to make this into somewhat of a tie? In short, China's naval expansion comes down to its massive manufacturing potential. While its current fleet is estimated at around 350 warships, that number is expected to surpass 400 by 2025 and reach approximately 420 within the next 4 years. However, even this is somewhat misleading, as a large number of those ships are corvettes, the smallest possible class of warships and designed primarily for coastal warfare. The US Navy actually phased out its corvettes all the way back after World War II. By contrast, the US operates 74 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers and 2 Zumwalt-class destroyers, compared to the 45 or so destroyers scattered across various classes that China uses. As such, it's difficult to ascertain exactly how China aims to compete with the US Navy in the open seas, but it might not have to. So far, the main contention points for the two sides have been the Chinese claims in the South China and East China Sea, including Taiwan. China's military influence doesn't extend far outside of its borders and the exclusive economic zone, meaning that it'll need more patrol and coastal-bound vessels than open ocean ones like heavy destroyers. In a realistic scenario, China doesn't have the vessels to operate a fleet that can mount attacks away from their mainland. This gives the US a significant edge when it comes to sheer naval power. Naval fleets aren't the only ones that are going to be vital in a theoretical US-China conflict. Air power is arguably more important than ever, and it's here that the US can really show off. First, the US has one of the largest fleets of military aircraft in the world, with over 13,000 total aircraft at the US military's disposal. By comparison, China has roughly 3,100 aircraft split between the Air Force and the Navy, and the differences in scale only start there. The US also has much more advanced aircraft. While the qualitative advantage is in the American corner in pretty much every regard, it's perhaps most notable in fighter and bomber aircraft that the two countries have to offer. The US Air Force fields the F-22 Raptor and the F-35 Lightning II, both fifth-generation aircraft built for stealth, superior maneuverability, advanced avionics, and multi-role capabilities. These jets give the US a significant edge in air superiority, with battle-proven technology and decades of refinement. China, on the other hand, introduced its own fifth-generation fighter, the Chengdu J-20 Mighty Dragon, in 2017. Since then, it's undergone several upgrades, improving its avionics, engines, and stealth features. There are three main differences to note between the US and Chinese aircraft here. To begin, the J-20 doesn't have the specifications to go toe-to-toe with fifth-generation aircraft. Frequent engine problems, mediocre armament, and a stealth-based design on outdated technology all suggest that the Chengdu J-20 Mighty Dragon is a reverse-engineered attempt at replicating Western fifth-generation fighters using whatever parts were available at the time. Furthermore, the J-20 has never actually been combat tested, so all of its capabilities came from benchmarking and dry testing. It could mean that the supposed competitor to the F-22 is nowhere near as capable as it might seem. Daniel Rice, a China military and political strategy expert at Krulak Center for Innovation and Future Warfare, argues that the Chengdu J-20 should be classified as a 4.5-generation fighter at best. What does go in China's favor, however, is its prodigious production rate. The US military currently operates 186 F-22 Raptors and at least 630 F-35s, with plans to acquire over 1,800 F-35s in the coming years, making it the largest fifth-generation fighter fleet in the world. By contrast, the J-20 is still relatively new, with over 300 produced by mid-2024. However, China is ramping up production, manufacturing around 100 J-20s per year, with no official limit on how long production will continue. Some estimates suggest that by 2035, the Chinese Air Force could field over 1,000 J-20s, potentially challenging the numerical advantage of US fighters. China is also accelerating its production of the J-16 and J-10, as well as their C variants for use on carriers. The J-16 is a multi-role fighter and has more than 100 airframes produced annually, while the J-10's production is around less than 40 airframes per year. These are analogous to third or fourth generation aircraft in the US. With all this talk about aircraft, it's important to note that manned vehicles might not be the gold standard for long. Unmanned drones have become increasingly complex and capable of performing devastating attacks. China is by far the biggest producer of drones, particularly commercial ones, and is home to some of the most well-known companies that develop drone technology. It's highly likely that China can quickly ramp up the production of drones, should they be considered for widespread military use. Overall, the advantage in the air currently belongs to the US, but that might not be the case for long if China finally develops a worthy contender for fifth-generation aircraft and starts production en masse. Of course, this doesn't take into account an aircraft that the US has which is seemingly unmatched by any military in the world, including China's: stealth bombers. The B-21 Raider is a relatively new addition to the US Air Force and it is still in testing. However, it would potentially allow the US to mount an aerial bombardment of heavily reinforced bunkers pretty much anywhere in the world. By combining the stealth bombers with piercing ordnance, the US could attack silos and weapon storages, removing another superpower's nuclear arsenal without resorting to using its own nuclear weapons. As of February 2025, the United States maintains a fleet of 19 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, following the decision to not repair one aircraft after a mishap in December 2022. The B-2, operational since 1997, is a multi-role bomber capable of delivering both conventional and nuclear munitions, with its stealth design allowing it to penetrate most enemy defenses. The B-21 is expected to gradually replace the B-2 fleet, with initial operational capability anticipated in the late 2020s. While the Air Force's official plan has been to acquire at least 100 B-21s, ongoing force structure reviews suggest that this number could change, potentially increasing to over 200 aircraft to meet evolving strategic requirements. China, conversely, is actively developing the H-20, a strategic stealth bomber intended to enhance the People's Liberation Army Air Force's long-range strike capabilities. Publicly revealed in 2016, the H-20 is projected to have a range of just under 8,100 miles and a payload of over 10 tons, enabling it to carry both conventional and nuclear weapons. This development signifies a strategic shift, allowing China to project power beyond the second island chain, potentially reaching U.S. territories such as Guam and Hawaii. Despite these advancements, U.S. intelligence reports suggest that the H-20 is unlikely to enter operational service before the 2030s. In addition to the H-20, China is reportedly developing the JH-XX, a tactical stealth bomber intended for regional missions. This aircraft is expected to complement the H-20 by providing versatile strike options within closer proximity to China's borders. Recent reports indicate that a prototype, tentatively designated as the J-36, conducted its maiden flight in December 2024, featuring a tailless flying wing design. However, detailed information about its capabilities and intended operational timeline remains limited. These developments underscore a significant evolution in both nations' strategic bomber capacities. The United States is focusing on modernizing its fleet with the B-21 Raider to maintain its global strike capabilities. Meanwhile, China is advancing its stealth bomber programs to enhance its regional and potentially global power projection in the coming decades. In general, the U.S. holds the lead, as the H-20 is still far in the future, leaving China with practically no stealth bomber options to speak of. This means that the U.S. would have a monopoly on long-range bombardments, given the current state of detection capabilities heavily favoring the more advanced U.S. designs. And speaking of performing long-range attacks, missile developments are the next comparison. In 2024 and early 2025, both China and the U.S. have made significant advancements in missile technology, reflecting their strategic priorities and military modernization efforts. At the China Air Show in 2024, China revealed the GDF-600 hypersonic missile, capable of reaching speeds up to Mach 7. This missile is designed for versatility, carrying various submunitions such as smaller missiles and drones. This enables it to perform multiple roles, including kinetic strikes, reconnaissance, and electronic warfare. Meanwhile, China also has been rapidly expanding its nuclear arsenal. As of mid-2024, the country's operational nuclear warhead count surpassed 600, with projections indicating it could exceed 1,000 by 2030. This expansion involves the development of new missile silos, submarines, and bombers, further enhancing China's strategic deterrence. Of course, this is nothing when compared to the American nuclear arsenal. The current stockpile of the U.S. nuclear arsenal includes over 1,700 deployed nuclear weapons and another 1,900 in reserve. This is the world's second-largest nuclear arsenal, only narrowly beaten out by Russia. The United States has also been making strides in missile technology, maintaining its focus on strategic deterrence and next-generation weaponry. In February of 2025, the U.S. military successfully test-launched an unarmed Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missile from Vandenberg Space Force Base. This test aimed to validate the reliability and effectiveness of the U.S. nuclear deterrent amid rising global tensions. Another key development is the AIM-260 Joint Advanced Tactical Missile, or JATM, currently in production for both the U.S. Air Force and the Navy. Designed as a beyond visual range air-to-air missile, the AIM-260 JATM is intended to counter advanced threats, and it'll be integrated into aircraft such as the F-22 Raptor and F-35 Lightning II. Lockheed Martin has also unveiled the Mako, a multi-mission hypersonic missile designed to be compatible with fifth-generation fighters like the F-35 and F-22. Unlike traditional large hypersonic weapons, the Mako is engineered for internal carriage, allowing stealthy high-speed strikes. Additionally, in January 2025, the U.S. administration signed an executive order to develop an Iron Dome-style missile defense system for the U.S. Inspired by Israel's highly successful Iron Dome, this initiative seeks to enhance domestic missile defense, providing a comprehensive shield against potential threats. Now, what about the land forces? We've already covered the relative sizes of the militaries in terms of manpower, but armored vehicles are yet another important aspect of their respective armies. The U.S. Army's primary main battle tank is the M1 Abrams, with over 4,600 units in service. Notable for its excellent combat performance, the M1 Abrams features advanced composite armor, a 120mm smoothbore cannon, and a gas turbine engine that provides exceptional mobility. Continuous upgrades have enhanced its electronics, armor, and weaponry to address evolving battlefield threats. This means that despite being developed in the 1980s, the design of the M1 Abrams, or more specifically the M1A2 Abrams, contains contemporary technology and armaments. In addition to main battle tanks, the U.S. fields a significant number of armored fighting vehicles, or AFVs, totaling around 38,600 units. This fleet includes the M2 Bradley infantry fighting vehicle, designed to transport infantry while offering substantial firepower and protection, of which the U.S. military uses around 800 ready and 1,400 stowed. The Stryker series, an 8-wheeled armored vehicle, provides versatility across various combat scenarios, with over 4,700 vehicles delivered, most of which are still in use. The U.S. also operates self-propelled artillery units such as the M109 Paladin, and multiple rocket launch systems like the M270 MLRS, enhancing its indirect fire capabilities. On the other hand, the People's Liberation Army operates 4,900 main battle tanks, with the Type 99 and its variants being the most advanced. The Type 99 incorporates composite and explosive reactive armor, a 125mm smoothbore gun equipped with an autoloader, and modern fire control systems. Its design emphasizes a balance between firepower, protection, and mobility. The PLA's armored fighting vehicle fleet is about 45,000 units strong, including the Type 4 infantry fighting vehicle, which offers amphibious capabilities and is armed with a 100mm rifled gun alongside a 30mm coaxial cannon. China has also invested in self-propelled artillery, fielding systems like the PLZ-05, a 155mm self-propelled howitzer, and maintains a substantial number of multiple rocket launch systems, such as the PHL-03, to provide robust fire support. While both nations possess formidable armored forces, their strategic focuses differ. The U.S. emphasizes power projection and expeditionary capabilities, maintaining a technologically advanced and highly mobile armored force designed for rapid deployment across diverse theaters. China's armored strategy is primarily oriented toward regional dominance. As we've mentioned, most of China's claims revolve around gaining control of the South China and East China Seas, Taiwan, and reinforcing its borders with other nations. This means that China is more accustomed to using defensive armored vehicles. In terms of sheer numbers, China holds a numerical advantage in main battle tanks and self-propelled artillery. However, the U.S. compensates with a larger fleet of armored fighting vehicles and a notable edge in technology, logistics, and combat experience. This would give it a significant advantage in a theoretical conflict. Then there's the unit that has long been the backbone of the ground forces, the revamped Marine Corps. The U.S. Marine Corps is in the middle of a major transformation called Force Design 2030, a plan that's reshaping how Marines fight, especially in a potential conflict with China. Launched in 2020, the redesign shifts the focus from traditional ground combat to a faster, more agile force that's built for maritime operations. The idea is to make the Marines more effective in the Pacific, where China's growing military presence is a major concern. A big part of this change is the creation of Marine Littoral Regiments, or MLRs. These units are designed for quick, small unit operations on islands and coastal areas instead of massive land battles. They'll focus on controlling key maritime zones, launching missile strikes, and helping the Navy dominate the seas. Each MLR includes an anti-air battalion, a combat logistics battalion, and a littoral combat team, all working together to create superior pressure and area denial. To make room for this new approach, the Marine Corps has cut out a lot of its old-school heavy gear. The first phase is removing all the tanks and traditional artillery. Instead, the new focus is on long-range precision missiles, drone warfare, and better air defense systems. By shedding outdated equipment, the Marines are freeing up resources for weapons and tactics that fit modern combat needs. This shift is all about countering China in the Indo-Pacific. If a conflict ever breaks out, the U.S. doesn't want to be bogged down in massive land wars. Instead, the Marines will use small, mobile forces to control key islands, disrupt enemy movements, and support naval operations. The strategy plays to the strengths of the U.S. military while making life difficult for Chinese forces trying to expand their reach. Not everyone is on board with these changes. Some critics argue that getting rid of tanks and heavy artillery could leave the Marines unprepared for certain types of battles. Others worry that smaller units could be too vulnerable if they get caught in a fight without enough support. But supporters of the plan believe this is exactly what is needed to stay ahead of modern threats, especially against a high-tech adversary like China. In 2025, one of the unexpected challenges facing Force Design 2030 could be funding. With the project now halfway complete, the Marines must carefully evaluate which capabilities are worth keeping and where to reinvest resources. Despite these concerns, Marine Corps Commandant General Eric Smith has confirmed that the program remains on track. If fully realized, it'll give the U.S. a stronger foothold in the Indo-Pacific, limiting China's ability to project power, especially through its Navy. When combined with submarine warfare, this strategy could create a true zone of denial, making it significantly harder for Chinese vessels to operate freely in contested waters. Of course, China also has submarines of its own, so let's see how they stack up. The U.S. Navy exclusively operates nuclear-powered submarines, emphasizing global reach and sustained deployments. The fleet contains 14 Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines, or SSBNs, which serve as a critical component of the nation's nuclear deterrent. Additionally, there are 4 Ohio-class guided missile submarines, SSGNs, equipped with conventional weaponry for precision strikes. The attack submarine force includes 3 Seawolf-class SSN-21s, 23 Los Angeles-class SSN-688, and 23 Virginia-class SSN-774 submarines, designed for a range of missions from anti-submarine warfare to intelligence gathering. The U.S. maintains a technological edge with advancements in stealth, sensor capabilities, and weapon systems, ensuring its submarines remain highly effective in diverse operational scenarios. The People's Liberation Army Navy boasts a mixed fleet of nuclear and diesel-electric subs. Again, this is due to a more narrow focus on regional rather than global power projection. As of 2024, the fleet includes 6 nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines, 6 nuclear-powered attack submarines, or SSNs, and approximately 46 diesel-electric attack submarines, or SSKs. Notably, China's diesel-electric submarines, such as the Yuan class, are equipped with air-independent propulsion systems, enhancing their stealth and endurance. While China has made significant strides in modernizing its submarine force, they're still woefully behind the U.S. counterparts, especially in terms of quieting capabilities and sheer operational range. In terms of quantity, both nations maintain substantial submarine fleets. China's projected to have around 76 submarines by 2030, slightly surpassing the U.S. fleet, which could give it a bit of an edge. However, the U.S. has the advantage due to its all-nuclear-powered fleet, offering greater endurance and operational flexibility. Technologically, the U.S. submarines benefit from decades of innovation in stealth and combat systems. China is still working on reducing the acoustic signatures of its newer models, which arguably is something that is practically necessary for the submarines to be effective at all. The recent sinking of China's advanced Jiao-class nuclear submarine during initial sea trials in 2024 highlighted the ongoing challenges China faces in its rapid naval expansion. It showcases just how much the U.S. has progressed due to having decades to perfect the technology that China is just now trying to reverse engineer for itself. Then, there is an ever-important aspect that likely won't show up when you run the numbers for each country's army: alliances and global reach. The U.S. undeniably takes the win here, as it's part of the largest military alliance in the world, NATO. This gives it unparalleled defenses against foreign attacks. With NATO containing most of Europe and Canada, the U.S. military is supported by other alliance members to create a more comprehensive defense throughout Europe, something that has become even more important after the war in Ukraine started in 2022. Perhaps more important are the defensive pacts that the U.S. has signed with South Korea, Japan, and Australia. All of these nations are significant military powers of their own and have large claims in the Indo-Pacific. In a hypothetical scenario where the U.S. enters a direct conflict with China, these 3 nations might be the first ones to join the U.S. due to shared interests and mutual defense agreements. With alliances spanning the globe, it's no surprise that the U.S. maintains over 750 military bases across 80-plus countries. Some of these bases house tens of thousands of troops and support staff, serving as critical hubs for power projection and rapid response operations. Key installations include Ramstein Air Base in Germany, Camp Humphreys in South Korea, Guam Naval Base and Andersen Air Force Base, and Kadena Air Base in Japan, all strategically positioned to counter potential threats. Beyond these, the U.S. also maintains bases in Qatar, across Asia and Europe, and in Diego Garcia, a highly strategic joint U.S.-UK naval and air base in the Indian Ocean, used for long-range bomber missions and intelligence operations. The presence of so many large military bases allows the U.S. Armed Forces to be practically anywhere on the planet in a matter of hours, should the circumstances demand it. By comparison, China is practically isolated. One of its most notable alliances is with Russia, and considering that Russia has been at war for the past 3 years, it's unlikely to be of much help in a conflict against the U.S. The war in Ukraine has degraded the perceived power of the Russian military, and considering that China has previously imported much of its weapons and military equipment from the Soviet Union, the same doubts could be cast on the PLA. However, the range of improvements that China's made over the past 2 decades puts it firmly as the world's second-best military. As for the first, there's really no contest. With an overwhelming technological and logistical advantage, The US military relies on its experience and quality to project power globally. China in its current state is an economic powerhouse, but its military-industrial complex is still lagging behind the US, at least for possibly the next decade. However, that gap might be narrowing. China could potentially use its industry to equip an army with weapons that are just good enough to sustain it. That could tilt the scales more to a possible draw. Who do you think has the edge in military power, the USA or China? Will China's rapid expansion eventually surpass US dominance? Or does American technology and global presence keep it ahead? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Now check out if NATO went to war with China day by day, or click on this video instead.